Everyone ready?
Yeah, Tom! Woo!
Yeah? Right, okay. So today I'm going to be presenting about dealing with imposter syndrome in technology. It doesn't always apply to technology, but I've scoped it out for technology because we're a technology company. So what is imposter syndrome? By definition, it means the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skills. And as you can see from the left-hand image, basically we assume that everyone around us knows more than what we do. But realistically, what actually happens is on the right, where you know just about the same as someone else. And you shouldn't judge yourself against somebody else about their skills or knowledge, because if I judge myself against someone else and they're doing the same thing, then that makes me even to them. So, show of hands, who suffers with imposter syndrome? 30%, show your hands. Okay, and 60%? Sorry, sorry, I didn't phrase the question very well. So, sorry, that's really bad. So it's said that in a person's lifetime, in their career, they suffer with imposter syndrome, and there's a percentage that they say is the average people that suffer with it. Hands up if you think it's 30%. Sorry, I didn't word it very well. Okay, so 60. Anyone for 60? Couple. And 70?
Even more.
You're right, it's 70%. Yeah, you're all imposters. Just checking my notes so I don't forget anything. Sorry. Okay, yeah, so before I move on to the next slide, I'm going to explain to you how I personally have suffered with imposter syndrome in my career. So the next slide will explain it in detail, but I'll give you a brief overview. So I left college with no qualifications. I quit college dropout, moved into a job in IT, and I was 17. Everyone else in the office was a lot older than me, and I felt like I didn't know a lot. So I was always saying, I'm not good enough to be here, why have they employed me? Like, I'm not good enough. I'm always comparing to someone else and saying, wow, they're amazing, they know loads of stuff. But in theory, like, I can learn that. I'm young, I can start that. But then I moved into another job in the same company, and I was made redundant, and that essentially made me feel worthless, which is not nice. Any of you have been through it. And so then obviously looking for a new job, and I was hired, and they said, and I said to myself, well, this company have made me redundant, why am I good? I'm not good enough to be here, like I'm not needed. So obviously now I've moved over to here, to Trey, and obviously it's a great place to work. And just going through each of these steps, am I smart enough to be in this job? This doesn't just apply to what I've explained in my own personal life, because there's people here that have completely changed job career. They've been butchers, nurses, and they've gone to coding boot camps, and they've learned how to code. So obviously they might be thinking, am I smart enough to be here? Well, yeah, of course you are, because you're here, you're doing the job, you're great. Why did they hire me? Same sort of thing. And did I make a mistake in choosing this career? Which I personally had when I switched career, because I went from IT support over to QA and then to automation. And I was thinking, am I actually going to be able to learn what's required to do this job? Because I didn't go to one of these boot camps, I didn't go to university. I was always comparing myself to other people, saying, like, they've gone to university, they've learnt loads, or they're a natural genius, they know how to do this stuff. I've had to teach myself, and am I just lucky? Am I lucky to be here, or is it because of everything I've done in the past that I can now see why I'm here? So if you've ever asked yourself these questions, then chances are you've probably suffered with imposter syndrome. There's a few types. You've got the perfectionist, which these aren't like something that I've made up. If you research imposter syndrome, there's these types, which I'll go through each one just to describe, because there's different levels and different understandings of what imposter syndrome is. You've got the perfectionist, who will always seek, so an individual who seeks perfection, and that might be in knitting, that might be in coding, that could be anything. If they seek perfection but they never achieve it, then they're always going to feel like they haven't achieved, and therefore their knowledge or skills are not good enough. And then you have the superwoman, superman, which would be someone who always goes above and beyond but doesn't really live their life, or could potentially work late all the time, miss out on their hobbies because they want to strive to be better, because they look around them and see, I'm not good enough because this person, that person are better than me. And then you've also got the natural genius, someone who, if you've ever felt like you don't need to put in enough effort to achieve something, or you're just naturally gifted in a particular subject, you might think, well, I don't try hard, but everybody else does. I'm clearly missing something. And then you've got the soloist, who would essentially do work on their own and say, I can't actually remember this one, but so they would, yeah, I'm going to skip that because otherwise I'll be lying. And then you've got the expert, someone who you look to and you say, wow, they know everything. They're a master in their area, and you just think, well, I'm never going to be as good as them. Like, there's been years of learning, I can never achieve that. But it works both ways, because the smart person will look at other people around them and think the same thing. Like, the lines I'm getting along is, people compare themselves and they don't feel like their skills and knowledge are good enough. So then why does this happen specifically in technology? Well, because technology is evolving every day. You think packages update hourly in cases, or you might learn a new framework and another framework comes out, or you might learn knitting and there might be a new way of knitting. Like, it doesn't just apply to technology. If you look back, say, 10 years, in effect, imposter syndrome obviously did exist, because it exists everywhere, but it wasn't probably as much prevalent because things don't change as quickly as what they do now. Which also comes on to, there's so much to learn and choose from. If you're going into technology, do you do back-end, front-end, QA? Do you specify in React? Do you do Angular? Like, you're always looking around and going, I need to learn that because that's what everyone else is doing. It doesn't matter, like, you're doing the best you can. And then there's the unrealistic perceptions, which would be, in the sense, you have to fit a certain criteria to do the particular job. Because in my eyes, a programmer is someone who sits in the dark in a hoodie, eats pizza, doesn't go out. Like, they're socialists. They don't do anything. They just sit there in a dark room and they code. But realistically, if we look around ourselves, everyone's different. You've all got different personalities. Loads of everyone does all different things. There's not one clear perception of what someone who works in technology is. And then you've got the competitive side of it as well, where people go to these hackathons, or you have competitive programming where you can, given a task and you've got to do it in the least amount of lines of code or the most efficient, people look at other people that do that and go, well, I don't go to hackathons, or if I write something I do it in 50 lines of code, but they do it in 20 lines of code. Doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, you shouldn't compare your efforts and your skills and your knowledge to other people. And obviously, this doesn't just apply to technology. It can apply to any industry or even in your personal life. So, as I mentioned before about my history and obviously understanding that I had thoughts of imposter syndrome, and I didn't know what imposter syndrome was until about 3 weeks ago, and I was always thinking and comparing to other people, and I thought, well, why am I thinking this? And I watch a few YouTube videos of people that do tutorials on loads of different technology things, and this one guy did a video about imposter syndrome, and I was like, right, that's it. That's like, I feel like I'm worthless, or I feel like I'm not good enough. But realistically, if I look around me, back to the original image where I think that I don't know enough and everyone else around me does, realistically, everyone else thinks the same, so we're even. Obviously, there's people that know more about particular subjects than others, or someone might have a niche. Obviously, there will always be someone better than you in a particular subject, but overall, we're like, people are even. Like, you can't know everything about everything. And to change your way of thinking, you need a strong drive, because you can't always see when you're doing well, and if you're passionate about something and you do it and you don't necessarily get a pat on the back, or you do something that's in your spare time, no one's really saying to you, oh yeah, like, you did a good job, which is then obviously leads on to give yourself the credit you deserve. If you've learned how to write hello world in a new programming language, great. Like, don't look at other people and go, well, in a week they learned how to do some magical code stuff. And obviously this is reiterated in the image to say, if you're aware of something, then you can change your way of thinking. And that's what I've done over the past 3 weeks. I've realised, because I'll be honest with you, I've worked at some pretty poor companies, and I've worked with people who are really good in their fields, and I've compared myself with them, as I'm sure some of you have as well. But being here, specifically in Trey, is like a benchmark for me. Like, I honestly didn't think I was going to get this job, because it was on the previous slide about unrealistic perceptions. Like, the job description, like, I don't fit everything, and there's people that have applied for jobs here that don't fit everything, but it's the drive and the passion to be able to do something that makes you who you are, and you can't compare, essentially. Like, there's no one person that ticks all the boxes. So this slide is kind of similar to what I've talked about before, but essentially just reiterating the fact that you shouldn't doubt yourself, and it's okay not to understand. If you don't know something, ask. Everyone here that I've come to and asked a question, whether it's about code or whether it's about muddy runner events, I didn't know what that was or whatever. If you don't know, ask. People will always be happy to tell you. And obviously you are good enough. Like I've said before, no, everyone's different. You're unique. And talk more, obviously. If you speak about these things and you say how you're experiencing like these thoughts, then you can share that and everybody else will understand, and hopefully you'll now have a better understanding of potentially why you might feel like this. And thank you for listening. Any questions? But it's kind of a subject that you can't really answer questions for, but I'll try my best. Ta-da! So is there any questions? Yeah?
Do you still feel that way?
Now that I'm aware of what it is that I was feeling, I'm more aware of it, so I don't feel. I obviously still feel that way because there are people around me that are amazing at their jobs and skills, but because I know that I shouldn't compare to people, I feel less of that. And an example which I'll give you is Joanna. Is she here? No, I don't think she is. She sent me a link, which is a questionnaire. Which there's this. Is it philosopher? I think it was a philosopher. And she basically did lots of research on women in university that were thinking the same thing, and she did loads of studies. And when they became more aware of what it was, they felt less like they were aware, so they didn't feel like it as much. And Joanna sent me, like I said, Joanna sent me a link, so I'll share it. And there's about 10 questions, and you answer from like not very much to greatly. And then once you answer the questions, it gives you a rating of how much you feel or how much you fit into certain categories of imposter syndrome. You know?
Would you say that imposter syndrome is that actually useful?
I guess so, because you could argue that it makes you aware of how good people are, because something that I forgot to mention in the chat was imposter syndrome starts from when you're a young age, from when you're a child, because you're always looking around you at adults and going, well, they're acting differently to me, because you only know how you feel on the inside, but when you look at other people, you only see their outside, you only see what they want you to see. So I guess, going back to the question of, could it ever be a good thing? I guess it could be a good thing of seeing other people's achievements. Obviously, the downside to that is feeling like you're rubbish and you don't know anything. But yeah, and the same thing. Yeah, so like you might look at someone and go, "Oh, they're amazing at their particular niche," and you might then strive to be better than them or strive to be as good as them. So yeah, I guess it could be a good thing. Obviously, these things are objective. Like, there's not one clear, defined answer. Like, it's just how you take it. And obviously, as I've presented it, is how I feel and how I've learnt from the understanding of it.
Just comment on that also. It's not necessarily, I would say, that imposter syndrome itself is a good or bad thing, but it can be a good sign that you're hanging out with really smart people. Like, if you go out of your way to hang out with people that are really good at something, I think that's like a positive trait, because it always means you're trying to learn from people, and that sometimes that can make you feel a little bit of an imposter, but it's also because of a bit of a bias who you associate with. I think that's like a really good bias to have.
So it's basically a symptom. Really wrong.
Yeah, it could be. Could be.
It depends on the effect that it has on you, presumably.
Yeah, of course.
If it's impacting your performance or your mental health, then that's a bad thing.
Yeah, and I've always said to myself, if I'm the smartest in the room, I'm in the wrong room, and I'm definitely not in the wrong room.
I didn't know it was a scandal.
But as long as you are aware that you are feeling the imposter syndrome, it is from there on you can improve. What are the consequences of having imposter syndrome?
I wouldn't say there's any consequences apart from feeling bad about yourself. Obviously, like that can impede your mental health, and then obviously, like if you're in that position, and obviously, I'm not saying it can, but obviously it could lead to potentially depression, and obviously there's a rabbit hole there that you can go down, but
There is a middle ground where it might not be that extreme, but it still might affect your confidence in terms of applying for jobs or having conversations with other people. Presumably, there's a middle ground between extreme depression and it still having a negative impact.
yeah, and like to reiterate what you were saying, like the middle ground. Obviously, when I was made redundant, I felt like shit. Like I felt worthless because they were just like, yeah, we don't want you anymore. But then obviously, now that I'm here and I'm aware of it, or even before I was aware of it, I didn't feel as bad, so I wasn't in I didn't feel so bad about myself, whereas obviously there I did. So obviously there is the bad sides, the good sides, and the middle ground of that. Julian?
Do you think there's any way that you think that Trey, or even we as people, can make someone else not feel like they've got imposter syndrome?
So to make someone feel like they've not got imposter syndrome is obviously it's down to the individual of what they're feeling or what type they fall under, because you might have someone that goes above and beyond all the time, but they feel like they're not doing enough. Maybe say to someone like, yeah, you are doing a good job, but then they might not have to push themselves so hard. Obviously there's loads of different ways you can do that, but I think the best way to help that is to talk about it. If you don't feel like you're very skilled or you want to learn something new, like go to your manager and say like, I did this project but I feel like I could have done it better, or can I learn this? Something like that, I guess. But obviously it's down to the individual. Like, best thing to do is just talk about it to people.
On that point, I think engineering managers can help with that kind of stuff by giving goals, so people feel they achieve goals, so they have some kind of reward. Because when people don't have goals, they don't know where they stand, so they just look at the other and think they are the worst. So if they are something where they achieve something, they feel better about themselves.
Yeah, clear goals will help, because if I'm given a goal and I achieve it, then I feel like I've done a good job. Obviously, that would help. Yeah, and I guess if you do feel like that, just speak to your engineering manager or respective manager and ask for clearer goals if they're not clear enough.
Also, knowledge sharing will help, because you have a lot of people that's smart in the room. People share.
Yeah, knowledge sharing as well, which. Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, there we go. So like with this image, those that can change their mind when presented with information that contradicts their beliefs, if you're sharing knowledge, obviously you change the word slightly and it kind of still fits. Any more questions or comments, or want to
How do you call someone out that is a genuine imposter?
I am. Oh, that's how you do it. I am secretly an imposter. Miles?
Do you have any resources that someone can go to?
Asking for a friend. No, on a serious note though, as I was obviously researching, because the initial spark of this idea was one YouTube video, but obviously I had to do some research. I couldn't just come up here and make it all up. But yeah, there are certain documents and videos. There's a couple of TED Talks of, in fact, there's a TED Talk of the CEO of Atlassian, who did quite a good TED Talk on imposter syndrome and how he potentially overcame it, because obviously people look at him as an amazing CEO and he's achieved so much, but realistically, if you listen to the talk, it's really interesting because he goes about how he's not good enough, and obviously comparing to others as well.
Can I just say, there's a very famous case that was, they talked about it in a documentary. So you have a big band that was Metallica, for example, and you had a guitar player that was fired, and he decided to quit when he was fired from Metallica, he started a new band, and he said that band is going to be way better than Metallica. That band came up to be Megadeth, which is one of the biggest rock metal bands, still not better than Metallica. That guy has a documentary where he actually cries and saying that he feels imposter syndrome every day. And this is a guy on the top, right?
Yeah.
Only feelings.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Another thing as well is, which is kind of related to this, kind of not, but I recently went to the Women in Technology event Tuesday, and it was really inspiring to say that obviously if you come together then you can make something better, and I think that's probably what we can do here. If obviously people are up for it, you can, like, or even on an individual basis to your manager, just say like, I need clearer goals, or I want to learn this, I feel like I don't know enough about that. Go for it. It's up to you, obviously. At the end of the day, it's your own thoughts.